What if the entire world that we live in was being controlled from outside? What if everything was an illusion run by a computer?
Megazone 23 is unapologetically a product of the 1980s. Colorful characters, killer soundtrack, bikes, mechas, idol culture, product placement, and a showcase of 1980s Tokyo. There was a lot more optimism in the air as less people were in poverty and had more spare change to spend on all sorts of goods. It was a really good time to be an anime fan. Now, as the retro mavericks, you may know that I absolutely adore the 1980s aesthetic, especially in anime. When coming up with video ideas, I knew Megazone was something I had to make a video on. It just looked like everything I possibly like about 80s Japanese culture. The hair, the music, the vibrant colors, a display of carefree youth culture, and the cool futuristic motorcycle that transforms into a cool mech. As I watched and analyzed Megazone, however, it made me reevaluate this romanticized image of 1980s Japan. Were things really all that great back then, or am I just looking back with rose-tinted glasses? I will be guiding you through the Megazone duology, and going into heavy spoilers with my analytical interpretation. I strongly recommend that if you even have the slightest urge to watch these films, I absolutely encourage you to pause this video, maybe save it in your watch later, watch these movies, then come back because they are amazing. And if this video encourages you to watch Megazone, then that's even better. My name is Mavericks, and together, we're going to enter the Megazone 23. It's the year 1985 in Tokyo, and life is perfect for our protagonist Shogo Yahagi. He's a teenage boy living his best life riding his motorcycle, picking up chicks, making a quick buck of Mickey D's, and just shooting the shit with his friends. Life is perfect for him. That is, until he meets up with his friend Shinji about a futuristic motorcycle he came across. However, a group of men in black appear and kill Shinji while Shogo escapes with the vehicle. From this point on, Shogo's life completely shifts as he's caught up in a conspiracy much larger than himself. Despite the danger, he still feels an obligation to avenge his friend. He first attempts to showcase the motorcycle on television before being censored by those same shady group of men. Shogo is then being chased by police, but by complete accident, he discovers the motorcycle can turn into a mech. After that confrontation and realizing the kind of people he's messing with are no joke, he attempts to lay low for a bit. It's during this part of the film we see Shogo and Yui's relationship begin to develop. Yui is a girl who Shogo meets at the beginning of the film. She lives with her two friends Tomomi and Mai. Mai wants to be a singer and works at the Hard Rock Cafe, while Tomomi aspires to be a film director. Yui also works at the Hard Rock Cafe but as a performer. Her dream is to be on a Broadway stage. Yui and Shogo begin dating, and he trusts her with hiding the bike and letting her know his situation. She lets Shogo come with her to a gig she has to do for a TV station. When it's over, Yui tells Shogo she must speak with this man about something important. Shogo immediately suspects this guy must be some kind of creep and recklessly saves Yui with the mech. The next day, Tomomi requests Shogo and Yui to star in her indie film and that she wants Shogo to ride the motorcycle in her film. Shogo warns Tomomi the bike is dangerous but agrees to help her out anyway. They look for a place to shoot but expectedly are being chased by a cop. They lose the cop by heading for a fork in the tunnel. They continue down the tunnel and they discover the desert of the real. This is Bahamut, a supercomputer that maintains a simulation of 1980s Tokyo. It is named after the giant fish or whale in ancient Arabian mythology that cosmically supported the world. Similarly, Bahamut, the computer, supports the stage Tokyo on a giant spaceship. For visual reference, this little sphere here, I know it doesn't look very good. This little thing is the space station, right? It's in space. Let me look for little stars here. This is just to show you that This is like a stage simulation, right? The computer right here, Bahamut. Basically, the supercomputer controls everything that's going on up here. It's like a stage, you know, like more so like the Truman Show than it is the Matrix. Shogo learns from this man Beatty that while the military has known about Bahamut for a while, the supercomputer has maintained this simulation of 1980s Tokyo for the past 5 centuries. Shogo believes it's the year 1985, but when in actuality, it is closer to the year 2485. Beatty warns of an external alien threat that will infiltrate the Megazone and put an end to the false peace Bahamut maintained. As a result, the military organization has expedited their weapons and development program and has nearly taken complete control over the Bahamut program. The bike they created, known as the Garland, was supposed to be the last override key to Bahamut's system. Beatty frames himself and the military as the rebellious good guys fighting against the oppressive simulation. However, Shogo recognizes that this is the same group that has unchecked control over the simulation and suspects they will use the simulation for their own agenda. After all, they are a military organization, making the decision that war is the necessary path to take down this supposed threat. Beatty offers Shogo a chance to join him, but Shogo rejects the offer and rides off with the Garland. Meanwhile, Tomomi filmed the Bahamut area, blissfully unaware of the consequences of containing such footage. Shogo begins to act more detached, feeling the weight of knowing the truth but can't liberate anyone with it. Mai barges in excitedly to let everyone know that she will be singing with the pop sensation Eve Tokimatsuri. Eve is a prominent figure in the film. She's everywhere. She hosts a news broadcast and the general public adores her music. She's voiced by singer Kumi Miyasato. Megazone23 was her debut as a seiyuu, and she saw wide success following. The music in Megazone to me and others is a significant highlight in its appeal. Genuinely, Megazone would not hit the same if it wasn't for that city pop soundtrack. Shogo and Yui soon find out that Eve actually couldn't make it to Mai's session. In fact, no one has ever met Eve in person. Eve is only seen on television. Shogo rushes to the station to find out that Eve was an AI-generated computer program all along. Specifically, Eve is more or less the soul or consciousness of Bahamut. As the military is overriding the simulation, Eve tells Shogo the whole truth about the Megazone. 500 years ago, Earth was made uninhabitable from a disastrous nuclear war. Humans were forced into space for survival. However, one incident occurred in which 2 biospheres containing human survivors collided. Eve warns that the same war that ravaged on Earth will happen again, leading to the death of humanity. Eve is a program designed to maintain the peace within the space station. When Shogo asks why Eve decided to replicate the late 20th century, Eve responds,
"Because that particular period in time was one of the most peaceful for all of mankind."
If any of you have seen The Matrix, you're probably familiar with Agent Smith's monologue on the creation of The Matrix, specifically when he mentions,
Matrix was redesigned to this, the peak of your civilization.
While the purpose behind both lines was to give the world a reason as to why it's a contemporary setting, in recent years the idea that the late 20th century was our peak is a sentiment that has become more prevalent. Megazone especially has a stronger and more compelling idea of the 1980s being the pinnacle of modern civilization. The original version of the Matrix was a utopian society that mankind rejected. The machines determined that mankind defines the human experience through suffering. As a result, the film's depiction of the 1990s is more grimy, with the green tint oppressing the atmosphere. By comparison, Eve's simulation is already a perfect utopia, brimming with colors and teens that are free to enjoy life with little to no parental supervision. Eve's simulation is a romanticized and idealized version of 1980s Japan. If you recall what I said about 1980s Japan earlier, it makes total sense how the 1980s is seen as the most peaceful time for mankind. Even to this day, Japan's economy has never quite recovered to the heights they were in the 80s. This romanticized simulation of 1980s Tokyo can still be seen as problematic as the simulation from The Matrix. Jean Baudrillard is a French postmodern philosopher most well known for his book Simulacra and Simulation. I've been bringing up The Matrix a lot in this video because the Wachowski sisters based the film off of Baudrillard's ideas. However, keep in mind that Baudrillard himself has stated The Matrix got his ideas wrong, famously stating, "The Matrix is surely the kind of film about The Matrix that The Matrix would have been able to produce." So why do I bring this up? Well, I think whether intentionally or unintentionally, Megazone draws a few parallels to Baudrillard's ideas. To understand the basics of Baudrillardian philosophy, you need to go over what a simulacra is. A simulacra is a copy without an original, or a copy that has lost all meaning from its original. There are 4 stages to simulacra. The first stage is reflection of reality. The image is the faithful one that directly reflects a deep reality. The second stage is masking, or perversion of reality. The representation begins to distort or mask the original reality. The third is the absence of reality, where the representation pretends to be real, but only ends up succeeding in masking an underlying reality. And lastly is pure simulacra, where the image bears no connection to any reality, it becomes its own truth. Another idea of Baudrillard is hyperreality. Hyperreality is when the media representation of something becomes more real than reality or its origin. Eve's simulation is a hyperreality, a culturally idealized version of 1980s Tokyo, with Eve inserted as the pop sensation. Her status is to monitor and maintain peace at the cost of concealing the truth. She doubles as both a stand-in for entertainment and an ideological enforcer. There is no political discourse, because people just listen to what Eve says at face value. This aligns with Baudrillard's ideas of how media generates reality rather than reporting on it. From this angle, it's easier to sympathize with the military that escaped from the influence of Eve. However, the oppressed later become the oppressors, as after they take control of the simulation, they immediately send Tokyo in a military state. Rather than the real Eve, they use an image or a simulacra of Eve to promote the war. Their goal was never to liberate anyone of the truth, it was to further their war effort. Director Noboru Ishiguro has been openly critical of war. Noboru Ishiguro, prior to directing Megazone, worked as a director for the movie SDF Macross Do You Remember Love? In it, the idol singer Minmay plays a pivotal role in stopping the war, not through violence, but through music. Eve similarly opposes the upcoming war, for it would lead to total annihilation. Back to the plot, Beatty and the military take complete control of the simulation and government, leading to a military state. The war to the people still inside the simulation becomes a spectacle made to be consumed. Remember earlier when I mentioned Tomomi filmed the Bahamut unaware of the consequences? Well, she tragically gets killed by Men in Black, not wanting any loose ends to their operations. This infuriates Shogo, leading to his final encounter with Beatty, where, yeah, he gets his ass beat. Megazone 23 ends on a bit of a downer. Tomomi is dead, all Shogo's friends join the military, Beatty fully establishes military shadow government, Mai leaves Yui to stay with her father, and Shogo barely escapes with his life. That's how it ends. Megazone 23 is incredible, and I wish this film was talked about a little more. It's so niche now that I don't think it's even cult classic status anymore. From the music to the animation to the voice acting to the thematic nuance of the narrative, it is such a well-crafted film, and it's crazy to think that this was originally pitched as a TV series. With the explosive popularity of Mobile Suit Gundam, saw a boom in mecha anime that wanted to capitalize on its model kit success. That's where Noboru Ishiguro and Toshimichi Suzuki founded their design studio Artmic. Prior, Ishiguro worked on Space Battleship Yamato and Super Dimension Force Macross, plus directed its theatrical follow-up. Suzuki meanwhile worked with Macross creators on Genesis Collider Mospita. The two combined elements from Macross and Mospita to pitch a new TV series titled Omega City 23. Due to lack of sponsorships, the show never entered production. A risky alternative, however, was the home video market. This gave the staff an opportunity to create higher quality animation, but having to adapt Omega City's story into a more condensed narrative. Not to mention, the home video market at that time was dominated by pornographic material. Hence why, in Megazone, the animators felt a little obligated to add in some nudity, even if it's over a monologue. This was a huge gamble, and all this effort could have easily been for nothing. Fortunately for Ishiguro and Suzuki, Megazone went on to explode and cause a new wave of fresh and original animation, all straight to video. While Megazone is not the first OVA, it is the first OVA that would be a major success and influence to the home video market of Japan and even America, as it was cheaper to dub over a single tape than a whole series spanning multiple tapes. With the huge commercial success of Part 1, Ishiguro felt it was appropriate to work on a sequel to properly conclude Megazone's story after leaving off on an open-ended ending. There would be a significant shift in art style and character designs, however. The animation director for Part 1 was Toshihiro Hirano, best known for being the animation director for SDF Macross Do You Remember Love. When the production began for Part 2, Yasuo Umetsu became the new animation director, and his style is drastically different from Hirano's. Instead of the more rounded and stylized designs of Hirano, Umetsu goes for a more grunge and gritty look, which I think fits the tone of Part 2. Sure, it's weird seeing Shogo and Yui look drastically different despite the canonical events being 6 months apart, but narratively speaking, these two are disillusioned from the simulation and are now rebels against the military regime. 6 months after the events of Part 1, Shogo Yahagi befriends Lightning and his biker gang Trash. They become a sort of ragtag group of misfits that knows the truth about their world and are punks who oppose the current regime. Shogo lays low with this group until he receives messages from Eve that he determines is calling to him. That's when he realizes that now is the time to retrieve the garland and restore Eve. Meanwhile, the military is losing units fast to the more advanced technology of the Deslog faction. BD also receives Eve's messages and suspects Shogo will attempt to retrieve the garland once again, so he assigns Lieutenant Yuichiro Shiratori to take care of him. Shogo and Trash successfully retrieve the garland, and Eve instructs the group to restore her program onto Bahamut by infiltrating the 7th level. Shogo and Trash plan to ride their bikes, fight off the feds, and infiltrate Bahamut to restore Eve to the program in hopes of ending the war before the Deslog approaches Tokyo. I know that was a vague summary, but Part 1 was focused more on world building, while Part 2 has a much more condensed plot. This is likely a result of Part 1 being a reworked TV anime, while Part 2 is a much more focused conclusion. On the home stretch to Bahamut, Yui suffers from a bullet wound. When Shogo and Yui make it to the 7th level, Yui asks Shogo why he never fulfilled his promise of coming back to her, the promise he made at the end of Part 1.
I can't tell you, but I'll be back, I promise.
Shogo.
Shogo explains it was to protect her since we know he barely escaped with his life and became the most wanted man in the city. He feared losing Yui the same way he lost their friend Tomomi. Yui collapses and Eve appears telling Shogo to place her in a pod. While Yui is being medically treated, Eve asks Shogo personal questions about him while throwing out bits of exposition. There's one takeaway that really spoke to me. Eve asks Shogo what it means to be an adult for him. Shogo responds by resenting adults for their selfish and masochistic actions of killing or exploiting others for profit instead of being like the adults he admired as a kid. He hates adults, which is why he never wants to grow up. Eve then recommends Shogo to be like the adults he admired because his actions could leave a positive impact on the world. Eve warns of the Adam program and how it's a program that is designed to return humans to Earth, but only those who won't repeat history's mistakes. The true purpose of the Eve program was to ensure humanity met Adam's criteria to return to Earth. You may notice that while everyone got a redesign, Eve is the only one who didn't. This is because Haruhiko Mikimoto, the character designer for Eve in Part 1, returned for Part 2. Eve is the only character in the film who maintains her original design, which I thought was neat. We get one last music video from Eve as the Adam Project is destroying the Deslog. During this, Shogo and BD meet one last time while the Tokyo simulation is being destroyed. Is this the end of humanity? Well, fortunately Yui recovers and the two walk up to see the sunrise. The simulation is no more as humanity has made a return to Earth. After Part 2, Ishiguro was done with Megazone and moved on to his next project, Legend of the Galactic Heroes. Yasuomi Umetsu will make his directorial debut with the OVA Robot Carnival and would be a key animator for Akira. Yes, there is a Megazone Part 3, but none of the original staff would return and it was basically made as a cash grab on Akira's success. I only saw the first half of it and it's not terrible, but it is so disconnected from these first two films that it honestly warrants its own video. With Part 1 ending on a downer, I think Part 2 is the perfect conclusion. Shogo learns to accept to grow up like the adults he admired, he escapes the simulation with all his friends intact, and there's hope for a better and brighter future. It leaves a contemporary person to ask if there is hope for humanity to escape the simulations Baudrillard was talking about. Well, Baudrillard was a very pessimistic nihilist. He did not believe there was any hope of returning to reality as he believed it no longer exists, completely replaced by simulacra. Instead of leaving you with the pessimistic message, I want you to ask yourself as an adult, How could you make the world a better place? Like Shogo, be like the adults you admired as a kid. Go out and enjoy life with the people you love, whether it be your friends or your family. And oppose those who abuse their power to trample on others. And maybe just like that, could slowly escape from the simulations that shackle us all.
What does being an adult mean to you, Shogo?
An adult. Well, it's something I wanted to be when I was little. But now I've learned to see adults for what they really are. Lying, hurting, killing each other. And for what? To make themselves rich. To gain more power. They do it just because they can. That's why. And that's why I don't want to be an adult. Not if it means being like them. And not the ones I worshipped as a kid.
Could you do that? Be like the adults you admired back then? If you could change this whole misguided society.
Were you able to see Eve?
Yeah, and she told me something. To grow up like the adults I used to admire as a kid.